Hi everyone, Elliot Jacobson here for Advanced Advantage Play. And I was asked a question recently out of the blue that sort of surprised me. I didn't have a good answer for it. And that question is, do I have a definition for a back off? Well, I looked in the books I've written, and I actually did find a definition that I put up in 2005 in this book, The Blackjack Zone, that I wrote. And I haven't really talked about it in any source since. So what I want to do is actually create a video that explains a bit about what a backoff is and compare that to sort of other ways that casinos might challenge you while you're on their property if you're playing their games with an advantage. So what I have prepared is a little PowerPoint. What is a backoff? So let me just go through that with you and talk about the points I raised there. So first of all, we have to distinguish a backoff from what's called heat. And heat is when a casino may not really know if what you're doing is gaining advantage or cheating or just getting lucky, or they just want to sort of test you out and see how things are for you, whether, if they put a little pressure on you, see if you give some additional clues. So my definition of heat is when a casino suspects, but is not sure that an individual is an advantage player, they may take actions to make the player feel uncomfortable. So let me just talk about some of those actions. So for example, if you're playing blackjack, then it's sort of well known that they, instead of cutting the cards 5 out of 6 decks, they might cut the shoe in half or even less. They might just deal you one round if they're dealing a single or double deck game. Anything so that you're not getting as many rounds per shoe or deck, so that that would take away an advantage you might get from just ordinary blackjack card counting. I mean, one of the goofs of this is that, for example, if you're using some other technique, whether it might be shuffle tracking, or the dealer is exposing a card during the shuffle procedure and you use some skill cutting, I mean, this sort of thing can actually give you a greater advantage for your particular advantage play. And a lot of times heat backfires and the casino doesn't even realize that they are giving you more edge if you're using an advanced method. They may limit the size of your wagers. Of course, this is sort of self-defeating. If a casino thinks that you are playing with an advantage, then I mean, what's the point of limiting your wagers? If they're not sure, then sure, limit the wagers and see if the guy leaves. But honestly, limiting the wagers, I can't think of any scenario where that's a good idea. But what you'll often do, see with people who suspect a blackjack card counter, and they know these people tend to wager through some sort of bet spread, from a low bet to a high bet, is they will say whatever first wager you make out of the shoe, that's the only wager size we will allow for the shoe. In other words, they won't let you spread. There was a famous case that I know of with a friend at a casino in downtown Las Vegas a few years back who was limited to that, whatever your initial bet is, that's what you have to keep your bet at. And he still was playing with an advantage, and eventually, even with that tactic, the casino ended up throwing him out. All right, the next is, and this has happened to me at the end of the deck, what you might find is a pit boss removing the deck and sort of counting it down and trying to figure out whether you're using a card counting system by correlating your bet size with the count as it goes through and the deck. So this has happened all the time, sort of a standard method, and it's intimidating to see a pit boss do that right in front of you because you know they're trying to get you for card counting. But again, if you're using some other method, you're seeing a whole card or you have some sort of edge sorting or whatever you happen to be doing, you could be getting that edge and completely uncorrelated to any count. So it's sort of, again, not a great method to detect all advantage play. And of course, they can just stand next to you or stare at you or engage you in great long conversation, anything to distract you or see whether they can find out some other information. And when I've been hole carding, I've had pit bosses standing there watch me play, and honestly, if they were standing in the right place, they would see the whole card too, but they're not, and so they don't see it. So it should be sort of a standard thing to look for whole cards if you suspect a play. Walk around the pit just casually on the outside of the pit. Check for other things that might be happening with the shuffle procedure, whether cards are being exposed, or there's some skilled cutting, or they're tracking aces, or shuffle tracking, whatever it is. But watching you play as a means of intimidation is essentially a form of heat. All right, and of course, if they really want to push you, they can just take away or get less generous with the comps they're giving you. This is a form of heat. An advantage player would immediately recognize, if there's starting to be fewer and fewer perks for them to play at a casino, that their action might not be wanted there without actively telling them they can't play. All right, now let's separate that from a back-off. A back-off is when you are actually specifically asked to no longer play a particular game in a casino. Usually blackjack is where you will see this. And sort of a standard line that you might be said to you is, "Sir, your game is too strong for us. You're welcome to play any other game in our casino except blackjack." And, I had this happen, and again, at many casinos where, for example, I was card counting just to pass some time while some friends would arrive so we could whole card, 3-card poker together as a team. And I would get backed off of blackjack for card counting. And then my team would arrive and we'd go over and get a much larger edge, whole carding some carnival game. So this is sort of a ridiculous thing to do to a player, because if you know that they're an advantage player, then only the weakest of weak advantage players are card counters. The stronger advantage players have a whole host of skills that they can apply in the casino. So any of those skills could generate a much larger edge than what they're getting at blackjack. And so simply telling someone they can't play blackjack, but you're welcome to, whole card our Mississippi stud, you're welcome to go over to our lost rebates on Baccarat, card count a side bet of Baccarat. Everything else is still available to you, right? So, at any rate, this happens with some frequency, especially to card counters, more than just about any other type of advantage player. Look, if you know I'm using a really advanced method, you're not going to want to let me play any game in your casino, right? So there's a naivety to having finally decided the player is good enough to back off, but not good enough for any other more advanced type of method. So a few comments about this. It's usually because you're a suspected or known blackjack card counter. They might even have located you through some surveillance network, some online database, or some existing book, with faxes or pictures from the old days in it. Usually, again, backoffs are specific to one game. You'll be able to play anything else you want. They're expressing certainty about your skill level. The casino knows how strong you are on a game. Really, it means they've checked you out. They have analyzed your play enough to be confident that what you're doing is a winning method. But actually, sometimes it's not. Other sorts of things do happen in casinos. A player might be backed off just because they've won too much, just by pure luck over too long of a period. But usually they're expressing certainty about your skill. And this back-off has to be separated in a very sort of legal way from being backroomed, where you are physically put in handcuffs and led into a room, suspected of cheating. A lot of lawsuits have happened by this for trespassing. For kidnapping. The casino can be accused of kidnapping you, or they are battering you by touching you, putting handcuffs when what you're doing is a legal activity in the casino. So it's not the same as being backroom. It's not the same as being trespass, where you actually read the Trespass Act and escorted off the property. It's not the same as essentially being refused all service in the casino. Sir, you are welcome to walk through our casino on the way to our restaurant, but not play any game, which has happened to me multiple times. So the idea of a back-off in general, and I'm not a lawyer, but it follows the principle that businesses can refuse service to any individual for any reason, except for, of course, excluded classes. And depending on the state that you live, excluded classes include a variety of groups that are sort of new, um, some gender types of affiliations and other. I mean, just look it up in your local region. But what I will say is that because these groups are so loose, there is the room for some players to sort of pretend to be in that group, even though they're not, just to make it a little bit tougher to get backed off. I was actually asked if I could pretend to be in a wheelchair, for example, when a certain group had a hole card game. So there is this idea that if you are wheelchair bound, of course, you'll be lower and maybe you'll have an easier view of that hole card, but it's not so easy to back you off, right? So, all right. Some advantage players just defy these backoffs. So you back me off, I'll just come in a different shift. When there's a different pit crew in there, I will possibly do a minimal disguise, whether it's wearing a certain type of glasses. At one point, I own glasses that change the focal distance between my pupils, or whether it's just sort of a brazen I'm better than the casinos and I'm just going to get away with it and push them until they finally take some stronger actions. But you'll find advantage players defying backoffs with regularity. Some of these backoffs have led to huge lawsuits, most famously Kenny Houston versus Resorts International Atlantic City, that effectively changed the laws. What happened in that case, I believe, is that New Jersey, they declared that casinos were only allowed to offer a game of chance. And because blackjack was allowed in casinos, it was declared that blackjack was a game of chance. In other words, skill could not exist at that game. And because of that, casinos were not allowed to back off so-called skilled players, right? They weren't allowed to keep them from playing, but they were allowed to do things like cut the shoe in half, or to give them, you can only bet the table minimum, and certain other sort of things like the player could play, just not how they want to. So it's sort of, the games were ruined, or some will claim it's ruined, others still claim they can get an edge there. I don't want to get into that whole conversation. There have been a couple other of these lawsuits in various states around the country that have led to successes, essentially, for the players. And there was a lawsuit about being backed off in Las Vegas when Kenny Houston died. I guess he was in Europe in the early 80s, but I think he had an active lawsuit at the time in the state of Nevada to try and get a similar sort of legislation or law passed to that, which was in Atlantic City. Again, you might want to look up that history. I don't remember it 100%. And yeah, like I say, some lawsuits have led to significant changes. All right, well, it's pretty clear that these things are, there's a lot of legal maneuvering still. There's a lot of room for interpretation and sort of defiance and all these things. So my own feeling about this, right? An advantage player, legal rights within a casino, the players following the house rules, being a good citizen. They're not being rowdy or loud or drunk or anything other, and they're not violating any laws, and they're there just as a player. I mean, this has not been fully tested in all courts and all jurisdictions. I mean, in this country or internationally, and it's tricky, right? But my personal opinion, what goes on inside my head, can never be a crime. It can never be punishable. There's no such thing as a thought crime, right? What goes on in your head is sort of nobody's business, right? What you think privately in the context of your own thoughts. And the idea that I could play fairly by all the rules, be a good citizen of a casino, and just because I'm capable of having certain thoughts, or I am actively having certain thoughts that other players at the table aren't having, for that reason and that reason alone, being denied the ability to play a casino game, that's never seemed right to me. And so I have always advocated on behalf of card counters in particular. Now, other advantage players who take sort of advantage of material defects in how the game operates, whether it's hole carding or it is edge sorting or some other defect with the game that may allow information sharing to become an advantage play. Those are sort of more technical, not just in your head, but you're isolating a procedural defect that's not really properly part of the game and exploiting that defect. So that's maybe a different side for me. But yeah, for card counting, I've never thought that casinos should have any right to back off any card counter ever, anywhere. Just my opinion. All right, so that is the end of this. I do want to just ask you to subscribe to my YouTube channel. It is Advanced Advantage Play, and you can also go visit my website, advancedadvantageplay.com, and there I think you will find many, many fun articles, legacy articles from my AP Heat days, and easy access to all these videos I've made, and I just think it'll be a lot of fun for you. So, with all of that said, I just want to wish you all well. This is Elliot Jacobson. See you later.